episode. So just want to take a quick second here to really obviously introduce who you are. I was trying to research a ton of your stats, but really excited. Always a pleasure to have a local Inland Empire Fontana native on. But we have Miss Jillian. How do you pronounce your last name? Is it Elaine?
Aileen.
Alleyne. I was like, I know I'm not saying it right, but she'll correct me, so it's all good. But so you went to Summit, University of Oregon, went on to play professional. But welcome to the show. If you could, we'll get right into it, but just let everybody know. Obviously, we introduce your name, but give us a little bit of a background of how you got to where you're at. Obviously, where you are now, all those things.
Yeah, okay. So, well, you pretty much ran through the bulk of it, but yeah, I'm from Fontana. I went to Summit High School, and I played at the University of Oregon. Go Ducks, by the way. And then I graduated, and I got drafted into the WNBA. So I also play in the WNBA, and I also play overseas. And currently, I'm right now in Israel.
That's dope. So obviously we talked offline a little bit about what this podcast is about, but just talk a little bit about your journey, like how you started off, on that path that you're on now. I'm assuming you played travel ball like most of us athletes and just kind of worked your way up, but like talk a little bit about that experience and that process for you.
Yeah. Man, travel ball, I feel like it's so different now, but playing was a lot of fun growing up. Of course, you're playing with your friends. Like at that point, like it wasn't like serious for me, like as far as like knowing that I could take it to do what I'm doing now. Like I just enjoyed playing. At the time, I was playing with my best friend. Her name is Chelsea, and her dad had a team, so I started with NJB when I was 9. I don't even know if NJB is still a thing, but that was like the basketball league before there was like AAU, before that was big. And
All
then,
right.
yeah, and then I went to play for my first travel ball team in Orange County. And then after that, I ended up playing for FBC, which was during high school. So that was my process as far as travel ball.
So obviously we've had the pleasure of speaking with different athletes from different journeys, and obviously specifically being a female athlete and a female basketball athlete. Like, do you think high school was as important as travel ball, or did one have more priority over the other? Like, what do you think?
I think that's a good question. I think they're both important. I think travel ball definitely gives you the opportunity to be in front of college coaches. Like you're gonna get a lot more exposure with travel ball, but I think both are important. And high school was so competitive, and it still is now. Like so, I think they both have their meaning and their resources. But I would definitely encourage, if possible, to pursue travel ball because that's really where you're gonna get your exposure to the college coaches and things like that.
Yeah, I know we were talking with players, and I actually was talking with the uncle of a upcoming athlete we're going to be speaking with, but he was just saying, having that opportunity to play travel ball and you get that chance to get that exposure to not only get in front of different college coaches and recruits and scouts, but it gives you the opportunity to play against different types of competition. So instead of just playing against, local kids that you see year in, year out, you get a chance to kind of expand your experience, so to speak, and you're playing against, more talented, bigger kids, faster kids, all those things. So once you get into the college level, it kind of gives you as an athlete that sort of, I guess it would be experience, right, of what it's like to kind of have someone or go up against someone that might be bigger than you, might be faster than you, and kind of helps to shape how you adapt. So that's really cool. So obviously played both, ended up getting to Oregon. Talk a little bit about that recruiting process and, what it was like being an athlete at Oregon.
I mean, honestly, recruiting was amazing. I had a lot of offers. Like I remember I used to just get mail after letter. Like to this day, I have like 3 stacks of like shoe boxes still of all my recruiting letters and all the schools that offered me. And I think I remember counting at the time. I don't know. I may have had like 50 or more offers or just interest from different schools. And I was like, whoa,
Wow.
like this is actually something that I can like I can go to college and play basketball. I think for me, that's when it really became real. I'm like, oh, okay, this can actually be something. So recruiting was a lot of fun. I mean, once I believe it's September 1st of your junior year or your senior year, they can start talking to you. It's probably sooner now because kids are committing like as freshmen in high school. And
Right.
how are you doing that? But I remember because I was at school on that day and I went to my high school library, and I remember like logging into my email and seeing like just a few emails from different schools, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I couldn't wait to go home and tell my mom. And I'm like, this is really happening. Like, I guess I didn't know what to expect. I just knew that was the day. So I was like, I'm gonna go check my email. And sure enough, I had like a couple emails, and then just from there it just got better and better. I had some college coaches come actually to my high school to watch me practice, to watch games. There was a lot of like meetings in homes. Like coaches will want to come and visit my family and talk to my mom and my family. And I was like, this is super cool. Like, I mean, from everywhere. Like coaches wanted to come from Kansas and from Georgetown, like just to sit in my home and like recruit me. So I was always just amazed at the process.
That's cool. I mean, and it's so funny. I was just having a conversation with someone yesterday, right? Like all of us athletes, you make it to whatever level you're at, but it's kind of that similar journey, but everybody's got that different path getting to that journey. You know what I mean? And like I played in college and played pro, but I wasn't recruited. My situation was a little bit different. But on the flip side, you have someone like yourself that's getting, a ton of offers and things like that. So it's really cool to kind of have that experience for some of our listeners. What are some of the things that you started to kind of look for that maybe you thought were important to have, or as you're meeting with these different recruiters and scouts and those things, like what are some of those things to kind of look out for that maybe helped influence your choice to land on Oregon?
I would say for me, it was all about the relationship that I had with the coach that was recruiting me. My mom is from, and my family is from Trinidad and Tobago, and I grew up on the concept that it takes a village, and so like relationships are important. And I was like, okay, let me see like the kind of people that I'm talking to. Like everyone's, these coaches are not just talking to you; they're talking to other players as well. But how are they as a person? So I would say that's what really helped me decipher like, okay, these are the schools that I'm really interested in, and these are the schools that I'm not. And of course, there's a lot of other things. There's like, what do I want to study? What school has the best program? Distance from home, that matters for me because I'm a big family person. So like, part of me wanted to go like stay close, but like not too close. But part of me also wanted to go like super far. I was like, I'm ready to go do
Far
something.
enough.
Yeah.
Right, right.
So ultimately, it really came down to how a coach made me feel. And I know for sure with Oregon, that was like the reason why I went there is because of how they made me feel, not just in the recruiting process, but also when I came on my visit. Because, anyone can say anything over the phone, but when you actually show up, you can actually feel what a person's about, what a school's about, what the program's about. And what I was getting through our interactions through email and phone call, I also got when I arrived there, and probably 10 times more. So I was like, okay, these people are very genuine and they mean what they say.
Yeah, you said something big there, like genuine consistency, all those things. And I like how you talked about, life outside of basketball, right? Like I always tell our athletes, and we say it time and time again, like it's not just about getting sold on the pitch, right? Like because everyone's got their pros that they're pitching you about how great campus is and all those things, but you're only going to be competing for the 2 or 3 months out of the year, so it's all those things that you mentioned outside of your sport that are definitely important, that hopefully, if anything, whoever, all of our listeners can kind of get that out of. So that's cool. Talk a little bit about your day to day, right? So obviously you were recruited heavily, ended up going to Oregon, first year or two on campus. Like, was that what you expected it to be, or was there like a little bit of a learning curve that you had to kind of adapt to?
Uh-huh. I honestly not really sure what I was expecting going to college. It was all so new to me. I was just open to the experience and, whatever came my way, but it was definitely a learning curve. Like I remember like the first big thing was like we have this summer program. I'm pretty sure most schools do it where the freshmen come in the summer and you basically get there a couple months before so you can adapt. You start taking summer classes and you're there with all the other sports, football, volleyball, soccer. Like we're all freshmen, all coming in, and we're all just like, bright eyed, like trying to figure out everything. So it was a big learning curve, but it was nice to be with a group of kids who were like, we were all in the same boat. No matter what sport we played, like we were all, fresh meat there. We were all new. So it was nice to have people to learn with. But the biggest thing was just the level from high school as far as what's expected of you to when you get to college is like day and night. It's so drastic. Like when you get to college, like it's like this. Like you have
Hmm.
workouts. Like if you're late, like you are sprinting, you're running the stadium, or you cost the team sprints, and you don't want to do that. Or the coach will. I had a teammate one time that came, I don't even know, maybe just a few minutes late to when we had to be there. And he sent her home. He was like, no, we're not going to do that today. And literally sent her home. And I was just like, dang, like this is like, it's cutthroat. Like maybe in high school, you might get away with being late, but in college, there's no games to be played at all.
Yeah.
Learning curve as far as like what was expected of you, what was required of you. And then also like when you did have free time, like you were usually studying or you were watching film or you were in the gym trying to get better. So it's like your whole life literally it takes on a whole different meaning to be a student athlete when you get to college.
Yeah, that level of accountability completely morphs, right? And it kind of you get that reality check, like, okay, like this is serious business. And I think, and I always say it, like it's an investment, right? They're investing into you, so you have to basically kind of reciprocate that. And if you show a glimmer that you're not, then you know it's not going to work out for that 3 or that 4 years, or however long you're going to be there. So that's cool. How so knowing that you went through kind of that transition, like how do you think that prepared you to obviously develop into the athlete, the woman, the person that you are now?
Honestly, it had a huge hand in shaping who I am now. It taught me accountability, responsibility. It also taught me how to be self-sufficient. I think I was always very independent, but it really teaches you how to be self-sufficient. Like if you know you have a class at a certain time or you need to study or if you're on the road, it's important that you do the things before that. Luckily for me, like this what I was studying and like for example, just an example, like what I was studying, I had people in the class that I was really tight with, like close with. So like if I had a road game and like we had to be at UCLA and USC and I know I'm gonna miss some lectures, like I'm like, hey, like can you send me notes like just so I can stay up to date? So it's like everything really falls on you. But the way that, especially Oregon, which I really love, was set up is like it's almost impossible for you to fail. Like you genuinely have to like really just not want to be there or like not try in order to fail. And I say that because it showed me that when I step into the real world and now that I'm a professional athlete going from college to pros, is like it's really up to you. Like no one's gonna tell you get in the gym and lift and get stronger. If you're not doing that, you're not on a team. Like no one's going to tell you you need to do recovery for your body. Like if you're not seeking and looking for resources to take care of yourself, your career may not be as long. So I would say the piece of college of teaching that independent time management really, really, really helped me as far as going forward and being a professional athlete now.
That's great feedback, and I mean that's so true. And that holds true to anything, right? Like you don't have to be an athlete to kind of go through that, but like you said, I think I'm a little biased, but I know firsthand, like when you're in a job interview, right? Like I feel like that's why most employers kind of are seeking athletes or whoever have that sort of competitive mindset, because you're kind of like put to the fire as an athlete. So that kind of translates directly to the business world. So that's very key. But on the flip side, right? You said it's hard to fail at Oregon. Like talk a little bit about that position where some, I guess, outside athletes, right? They're like, oh, athletes have it made, yada yada yada. Like, what do you think about that dialect,
Yeah. Oh man, that was the talk of the town for sure.
especially at Oregon, right? Because you guys have like Nike in your neighborhood, and you have a
Yeah.
big football program. So it's like, oh,
Yeah.
these kids have it made. Like, what are your thoughts to that?
Honestly, what people say is true because we are given a lot, especially at Oregon. Like, we had facilities that no other college in the country had. We had access, we're Nike University. Phil Knight, the creator of Nike, is literally visiting our school on the regular. We have LeBron James, Dwayne Wade. Like, we have people that we have access to things that a lot of other schools don't. So a lot of times there was one time where it was a big deal because the students were like, we had this building called the JQA, which is basically a building only for student athletes. That's where we go and we have our tutoring, we have computers. Like that's where we go and do all our academics. And if you weren't a student athlete, you were not allowed above the first floor. So the first floor had like a cafe, you could go in there, but anything above that, like you couldn't go in. And I remember it being such a huge problem, like on campus. Like kids were like, you know, athletes get everything. Why do they have a building just for themselves? Like they, you know, and it's like when you think about what's asked of us and what's required of us as athletes, like we almost have to have things like that because you have certain players like let's say Marcus Mariota at the time, who's now currently in the NFL, and you have Justin Herbert who plays for the I believe the LA Chargers.
Chargers.
Yeah, so
Yep.
you have players like this who are, you know, we're all kids and like we have football games. So imagine, you know, players like this just walking around every day, like in the library where students are bothering them. They want to talk about this and that. Like we still need a place that we can go where essentially we're not athletes, like we're students. We want to learn, we want to, you know, do what we have to do. So I think that conversation goes both ways. Yes, we do have privileges that a lot of students and, you know, people who aren't athletes don't have access to, but like I said, when you look at what's being asked of us, we need those things and those resources to where we can get away from being that athlete and actually be a student so we can graduate and get our degree.
That you bring up a good point, and I never really looked at it like that because especially if you know some of those athletes, you know, the Reggie Bushes of the world, and these like very, very highly sought after athletes, where obviously in his time, right, like before the NLI deals and all those things came about, like, you know, those are the athletes that kids are like, oh, let me get some memorabilia. So I can't even imagine what it'd be like getting harassed like that.
Yeah.
So that's a good point. And like you said, you know, that expectation of the ask is a lot higher and a lot different, really. So that's interesting that you say that. So one thing that I'm really interested about hearing, and I love getting the female perspective, like what are your thoughts from a female point of view being an athlete? Like I personally always notice, like I'm a fan of all sports, right? Like I watch anything on TV. If I can go to a match, like I stream, you know, volleyball games for athletes that I know. My boss's daughter plays in Colorado and I'm like watching her games and things like that. But like, why do you think it's so important for the dynamic in female sports to be so positive all the time, right? Like you always have, you know, cheering and clapping and positive reinforcement. Like that, I feel like that's almost, if you're that athlete that doesn't like that, it's almost looked at negatively within that team versus guys. Like you don't have people clapping, doing cheers, huddling up, you know, being so positive all the time. Like, why do you think that is?
That is a great question. I don't know. I think naturally as females, like we are naturally nurturers. Like we want to care for others. We want to take care of ourselves and others. So I think that shows up in our game, no matter what sport you're taking, you're playing. Like we're just very supportive. We want to cheer. We want to, you know, we want to essentially take care of each other. And I think um, on the male side, like it's a little bit more like I hate to say every man for himself, but that's kind of more so the thought process I think with guys. And I've had coaches and people who said like I'd rather coach like a women's basketball team than a men's basketball team because you guys are much more receptive to what I have to say. There's no egos, like you guys want to learn. I've heard that a lot actually. And you'll see a lot more coaches transition from the men's side to the women. And now you see, even in the NBA, Becky Hammon, Teresa Witherspoon, like you see women transitioning to the NBA side, and it's taking like women are starting to like go up in positions, assistant coach. Like the next thing will be a head coach because naturally, I feel like we're just nurturers. We care, and I feel like a lot of times guys don't get that. It's more so like I gotta fend for myself kind of thing. And it's like no, like if you have a coach, like they're trying to teach you, be teachable. So I think I would just attest it to that, like just naturally that we're caring human beings, and like that's just how we
Yeah.
care. But yeah, I think that like I said, what you're seeing now in the NBA with more women pursuing these positions, you see that it's starting to open up more for us because there's something that we can bring that maybe another, you know, male coach can't do.
Yeah, I hear you. And obviously that translate to you being on that team as well, right? Like if you see someone maybe that's doing well, I guess it's just different response, right? To if a player's up or down and how as a teammate you're reacting to that versus how the guys would respond to that. So That's interesting. I've always thought about that because, like I said, my sister-in-law played softball at UNLV, and as a performance coach, like we've trained athletes that play softball and volleyball that went on to play at Cal and Stanford and Oregon and all these things, right? So it's like I've always kind of wondered that dynamic because that's one of those things that I've noticed has been pretty consistent across sports at every level. So it's kind of interesting that you say that, but maybe it has something to do with how connected or how those relationships are off the court or off the field too.
For sure.
But
And sorry, just to touch on what you said, like softball. My sister played softball when we were younger. I played volleyball in high school. Like when you think about, especially in volleyball, like after you score, like what you'll notice every time with the women is, we come together and we do a cheer, or even in
right,
softball, cheers for like everything that happened. So I just feel like we want to stay engaged and we want to encourage each other, and I don't see that as much on the men's side. Like even just in a high school basketball game or even a professional game, like usually like you come together after something happens. You talk about, we want to talk. Women want to talk. We want to figure out, what's going wrong. And I feel like guys aren't really like that, and you really have to nudge them in that direction. So I don't know. That's a interesting piece. But you think about how each sport is taught. Like when you go into softball, you're gonna know at least 5 cheers for the batter. Like by your first week of playing the sport. Like I don't know if they do that on the baseball side. Like
I don't know. I don't know any guy sports that have one
yeah.
cheer that they're going to. That's what I'm saying. Like that's my thing. It's like maybe it has something to do with like positive reinforcement equates to better performance versus on the guy's side, it's like, okay, cool, we'll pump you up. Hey, good job. And that's it. Move on to the next. So I don't know. That's just one thing that I've always been curious about that I wanted to get your take on.
Yeah, and also like what you said, like on the guy side, I feel like it's like, all right, like the whole like concept is like, okay, like man up, like if something happens, like you're fine, like kind of thing. And it's like, no, like it's okay to say, hey, like, I'm not feeling good today, or like express how you're feeling. And I think that's kind of an outdated way of teaching like young men and young kids growing up. It's like it's okay to express how you feel. If you want to cheer on a teammate, like I feel like that's not considered essentially masculine for lack of better terms, but it's like I think if we can switch that narrative and look at it differently, it would really make a difference.
You mentioned something that I think is spot on with a big topic today, globally, economically, all those things like mental health. Like,
Mm.
what are your thoughts on that, and obviously how that pertains to you as an athlete, your development as an athlete, or even some of the development from the younger athletes, high school, college, and on.
Oh my goodness, mental health is so important. And I just love that there's a story that's being talked about, there's being light shined on it from when Kevin Love released his story about how he was struggling. And then you just seen more and more players actually talk about it. I think that story that Kevin Love did was really like a breaking point in the sport world where it's like, okay, like, yes, athletes are people too. Like, we deal with things, and I'm going to speak up about it. And I remember reading that piece by him and how he was saying he was having like panic attacks before the game. And I'm just like, how amazing is it that first an NBA player, again, like how we were talking, like a guy is saying, look, I'm struggling with something. And what I chose to do at the time, or what I was taught, was just to suck it up and keep going. But now I'm choosing to say something. So mental health is so important, and it's across every sport. And what's really sad is even in this past summer, have you seen 2 or 3, even more people take their life? I remember hearing about a soccer player at Stanford who everyone thought was fine, was doing
Yeah,
great. They know, like, she took her own life. And it's just like, how are these things happening, and why are we not hurrying to create spaces where athletes can talk about what's going on? So a lot of times, we're seen as entertainers and that we have it all together and our life is glamorous, but really behind the scenes, it's a lot harder to be an athlete than people think it is. Like all they see is what's put on TV, but you don't see the preparation behind it, the demand, the physical and mental demand, like what's asked of you. And again, I touch on that, like what's asked of us, I really think is something that needs to be talked about more, because it's a lot. It's a lot more than what people see. And I just think we have to continue to keep the spotlight on mental health and continue to grow that in sports. Like I think we're just scratching the surface of what that looks like for sports and for athletes of all walks of life.
yeah, that's real. And it's funny because, I mean, it's not funny, but like now that it's become more in the forefront, right? Looking back in retrospect, like I remember having a couple of my teammates where they were just, first year, second year in college, and they were going through some of that stuff too. And it's just like, it's overwhelming. And I had one of my teammates after our freshman year, he was, all conference. He started, 90% majority of the games, and he was just doing great. Didn't come back after our freshman year. And
Wow.
I'm like, dude, like, what do you mean? No, you're just gonna walk away from it? Like, you're on scholarship,
Yeah.
you're a 3.0 plus student and all those things. He's like, man, it's too much, and I'm not the same. And I remember him telling me that, and for me, my mindset was completely different because of I don't know if it was my background or just the plan that I had for myself or what the case may be, but I just like that was a moment that stuck out for me. Is like, man, different people again are going through different things and they're responding to things differently, and maybe something that is working for me might not be beneficial for them, you know what I mean? So that's kind of it's great that you say that, because that might, I believe it's going to start opening up a new direction, new wave of how athletes are being trained. There's that component that's going to be involved within it well. And again, it's interesting that you bring in the female perspective of the Becky Hammonds of the world, because, you have that nurturing component
Right.
where they're checking in with their athletes. You're more connected, I would say, where you're able to understand. And we had our previous guest on here. She's a coach at Ohio State University, and she was saying that same thing. Like, hey, I check in with my players and I try to be relatable, and that helps me be a better coach, but also it helps me with recruiting, so I can make that connection with them and I have a better understanding of, who the athletes are, where their background is, what they're coming from, what they're experiencing. So when they come across those things, we have that rapport where we can address it, we can help them, and obviously we can get through it to make them better athletes, better people, but also, be better contributors to the team, to the program.
Right. Yeah, 1,000%. I think that's really what it's all about. And like I said, these things need to be continued to talk about because it's important for everyone to have an outlet. I remember listening to a podcast that you did with a softball player from Temple. I can't remember her name right now, but
Anna.
what is it, Anna?
Anna, yep.
Yeah, I really loved how, and I told you, I was like, I listened to that episode and I thought it was so good. And I really loved how she was saying that she didn't feel like she could reach out to her parents and talk to them about things that she was going through. And I find that to be so true with so many people. Like, no matter how good you are at your sport, like, not everyone has that outlet. Like, I'm blessed that I have a mom that I can tell anything and talk to her about everything, but not everyone has that. And it was just so profound what she was saying. And, that not being able to have that outlet with her parents in the beginning, like, kind of forced her to second guess like herself and what she was doing and if she even really wanted to continue playing. But I believe she said once she started talking to her mom and, that relationship as far as like communicating about different things got better, she felt more confident to go forward and do what she needed to do. So I just think at the end of the day, as humans, we all need support, whether it's from our parents or it's from a coach. Like, a coach checking in every day is better than nothing. It's sometimes some people don't have that family support or those friends that they can talk to. But I know if I come to practice every day and my coach is asking how I'm doing outside of my sport, that is going to make me more excited to want to show up and want to be there. I feel seen, I feel heard. I know that if anything is wrong, I can go talk to someone and there's an outlet. And I think that we have to talk more in sports. That's the thing. It's like we're expected to just be one way, but there's so many different people, so many different ways we respond to things. And it takes one coach. Like, I had it for me, and I'm so grateful at Oregon. Her name was Coach Chandrika. Like, outside of basketball, she'd be like, hey, you want to go get coffee or do you want to go grab something to eat? And we would not even talk about basketball. We would talk about life, how I'm doing in school, how's my family. And for me, that made such a difference. Like, just to know that you cared about me outside of being an athlete, like I was a person to you, like, that means a lot.
That's amazing that you said that, because that segues right into my next question for you. It's like the main reason why we started this podcast was really to be supplemental to our mentor program. And through my experience, I found that, there's a lot of kids, especially within the Inland Empire area, right? Maybe they're first generation college students or first generation athletes that are getting recruited, trying to get recruited, and they have no mentor to kind of guide them through that process, let alone kind of be there for them when they get there. Like, hey, this is what you need to do. These are the things that you need to do. These are people that you need to seek out. This is how you need to act. This is how you need to carry yourself, all those things. So you touched on it right now. Like, how influential or how important is it to have that mentor to kind of help you navigate or help athletes navigate even to this day? Like I'm sure you still have those athletes too, right?
Right, right. Honestly, it's really, I hate to like be dramatic, but it sincerely is life changing. Like I think that to have that support and to have someone that you can talk to really means the world and changes your perspective on everything, especially when you're like going into college. It's already a lot. And that's something again that Anna talked about. Like it's so much that's being asked of you, you know. You have to do well in school, you have to do well in your sport. If you're not doing it well in your sport, it has a domino effect on everything else. So there's just so much that's being asked of. You're 18, 17 years old, you just came from high school, like you don't know anything really. So it's like
Right.
you're basically being forced to go to grow up. Like essentially college athletes, if you really think about it, are in some way professionals. If you take away the schooling, like we're spending 80 hours a week. We're between film, practice, traveling, games, like we're spending 80 hours a week minimum, like just to do our sport. So it's like
Right.
taking a 17-year-old kid and you're thrusting them into this whole different world, and it's like where's the support as far as the steps to where they can not gradually, but where they can sustain what's going on, and they can know that hey, like if I'm struggling with something, I know people expect a lot of me, but here's a coach or here's a teammate I can go to and be like, hey, like I'm struggling with this, can you help me? And I think that's so big, and that's one thing that I want to credit like Oregon too, and everyone who is a part of the student athlete community. Like we had resources to any and everything that we needed. Like I said, it's impossible to fail as an athlete and as a student, but even as a person, because people genuinely cared. Like my tutor, like I can go in there and I know like if I'm struggling at something, yeah, we're going to talk about it, but also they're going to ask me how I'm doing, how's the transition going. So I think it's important for these universities and these colleges and even in these high schools, or even if you're just like a neighbor, like if you know your neighbor is a student athlete, hey, how are you doing? Maybe you don't know nothing about sports, but it's the simple how are you that makes a difference. And also, like you said, not just that transition from high school to college, but continue to check in. Like once you get to college, it's a whole nother ordeal.
Right.
Don't just stop asking how someone's doing. Like continue to be a resource or a support in any kind of way. And that's like my biggest thing that I was telling you is like why I had a camp this summer, is because I want kids in the IE to know that there's someone who's willing to reach back and be a resource. Even if you don't play basketball, you can play soccer, but you're going to know that if you need something or you want to talk to me, I'll put you in the direction of someone who can help you. And that's super important. Like my mom says, from what I said in the beginning, it takes a village. It takes a village to really build up and, support people.
And you're spot on with that, and that's why I'm excited when you get back. We're gonna definitely partner up because I feel that same way. Like it's it's sad because there's a lot of talented kids in this area, but they just have no clue on what opportunities they can actually reach because they didn't have anyone do it before them or have anyone within that village to kind of connect them. Like, hey, you're a baller. Go to junior college, get the grades, get some experience, and then transfer out. Like, there's so many different avenues and platforms that they just don't know of because they don't have that access to. So again, I'm excited that we're able to connect, and we're definitely spot on and aligned with our vision and being able to help not only these athletes in the Inland Empire area, but who knows, expanding outside of that as well. So that's great.
Yeah, 1,000%.
So cool. Well, last question. I know it's starting to get late over there for you, but I always like to end off the podcast with two questions. Well, literally one question and one request. But if you were to go back and, I wouldn't necessarily say change anything for the better, but like if things were to go differently, right, for you along that path, like what's something that you're like, man, if I could change this, I would do this differently because I know now that I know it would have yielded this result.
Ooh, that's a good question. Oh man, that's such a great question. Mm, 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 mm.
And it could be anything. It could be anything, transitioning from high school to college while you're in college, or maybe some decisions that you made during your professional career. Like which is something that looking back on that might be beneficial for anyone listening.
Yeah, okay. I would say that after I had gotten hurt my senior year of college, I feel like I personally went into like a darker space, and it was very difficult. Anyone who's ever dealt with an injury knows how difficult it is. You look at any player across any sport. You look at Klay Thompson, who, what, 2 years since he even got a chance to go back on the court. Like,
It was a year and then another year. Like that's
right,
devastating, right?
right, back for him. So for me, I think during that time, like I said, it did get dark, and that's why I'm glad we talked about just mental health. I had someone who came to me. It was actually my trainer who was rehabbing me at the time. Her name was Brittany, and she was the one who's like, "I think you need to see a sports psychologist." And that's the first time anyone's ever said anything like that to me. And I was like, "Okay." And once I started talking to this person, like, it wasn't just about sports. It was about like things that I didn't even know that were like coming up for me that, you know, I was able to work through. So I think that what I would have changed is I'm just a very quiet person. I bottle everything up. I don't really talk about how I feel, and I know there's a lot of people out there who struggle with even just putting, you know, their feelings into words or their emotions into words. And I wish I would have reached out sooner saying like, "Hey, I need help. Like, you know, this is really hard for me. I need like support." And I had the support. Like, that's the thing. It's not that I didn't. Like, I had, you know, my family, my friends, my teammates, the college, like everyone was behind me. But for whatever reason, I masked that to be enough instead of just saying, "Hey, like, I actually need some help. Like, every day is like really hard for me. Like, even if when I come into training, if you can just give me like a positive word to help me get through the workout." Like, there was a lot of times where I was just struggling to just walk, to learn how to re-walk. So I would say what I would change is essentially asking for help sooner, and just not accepting if I didn't feel like it was enough to say, "Hey, like, I need more help. Like, what else, what other resources do I have access to that can help me feel a lot better about what I'm going through and help me get through it." So yeah.
Damn, I just got chills right now because you saying that just reminds me of that athlete from Stanford that we just talked about. Like man, like what if there was someone in her corner, or maybe she had that level of comfort to be like, hey, like I need help. Like I don't know.
Mhm.
It's so true. But yeah, thank you for mentioning that.
Of course.
Last thing, if there was anyone else in your network, we always ask throw out one or two people that you think would be good, have a great story, or someone we can connect with. That would be a great guest for our upcoming episodes, and you got to help us connect with them to make that happen. So who would that athlete be? I'm putting you on the spot right now.
Okay, I feel like you're giving me like all the smoke pot.
Exactly. Yep. That's
At
such a
the end.
good one. Yep.
Yeah. Let's see. Wow, so many good people. You know, I would say I would put she's not from our area, but her name is Erica Hall. She played at Stanford. We went against each other for years, me being at Oregon, her at Stanford, and then we were teammates with the Washington Six in the WNBA. And she actually had her own podcast, but that she had a very just difficult summer coming back from an injury. So I think she'd be a great person to talk to, and I think she'd be a great addition to your podcast.
All right. So you said Erica Hall. Is that who you
Eric
said?
Call, McCall.
McCall. Okay. So you're on the clock. So you got to help us with connecting and making it happen. All right.
All right.
Cool. Well, just to wrap up, again, thanks for taking the time. I know you're all the way across the world for us, so definitely appreciate it. But if you'd like, give out your Instagram. If anyone listening, they want to connect with you, maybe follow up, ask some questions if you're open to it. How can anyone reach you?
Yeah, of course. On Instagram, my Instagram is Trini Jilly Doe. It's TrinnyJillyDoe. My family's Trinidadian, so that's where that came from. And then on Twitter, it's Super J. It's SUPERRJAAY. And then I'm also on Facebook under Jillian Alleyne. And yes, please feel free to reach out to me. Like, I am a resource. Whoever's listening to this, if you need help with anything, whether it's basketball or if it's just life questions, please feel free. I'm an open book. And it's funny. I'm really glad that we did this podcast because I had I think like two or three people this summer, like one girl who plays at Summit High School, another one who's in college at Cal State LA, they literally just came to me and asked, like, Jill, like, I want to play professionally. What is the next steps for me? What does that look like? And I was like, wow, like in my head, I'm like, you would think they would have someone in their corner, whether it's their coaches, like showing them and telling them what they need to do. And like, I'm glad that they felt comfortable enough coming to talk to me, but it's like, these resources really aren't there. And I really want to be however I can help. Like sometimes I may not know, but like I said, I can hope to point you in the right direction. So yeah.
100%. And again, that's why we have our mentor program, Tri Elements Athlete Development, where the goal is, again, to connect these athletes with mentors like yourself to kind of help guide them, navigate, answer questions, or again, just be a resource. So you are 100%. So again, definitely looking forward to partnering with you. For everyone who's listening, we want to thank you again. Don't forget to like and subscribe, share with some people, help us to grow the channel, but more importantly, hopefully share with someone you think that will benefit from it. So until next time, we will catch you on the next episode. Jillian, good luck, and we will see you when you get back.
Thank you.
All righty, have a good night.
You too. Bye.